Humans are weird upcycling. I am simply uneasy about the situation, Quartermaster Husk said, his tail twitching in accompaniment. I just need to grind the situation over with you before I approve the request. Commander Thresh gave an encouraging thrum from his secondary vocal cords when the quartermaster paused. Thresh knew very well exactly how soft his own scales were compared to the old quartermaster. Husk's scales had grown opaque long before Thresh was hatched. Moreover, the old gathering had dedicated himself to his calling of providing for the adventurous and the youthful-spirited. Added to all of that, Quartermaster Husk had been on one of the few ships that had encountered humans in the first days of their contact with the galaxy at large, and had been in near constant contact with them since. It would have been stone-brained for any commander to just dismiss the quartermaster's concerns, let alone a commander as new as Thresh was. Still, it was clear that the older gathering was by natural disposition, a disposition that had been strongly tempered by the experience of those first chaotic days of contact with the humans, far more than overly cautious. Therefore, Commander Thresh listened intently to the long list of minor safety infractions that the current human population of the base had incurred over their stay. They are simply going to, what is the word they use, upcycle some expired equipment. Commander Thresh glanced at the proposal. It is considered safety equipment at that. There is nothing toxic or dangerous, and every human is rated to safely dispose of pressurized containers. Added to this, they proposed a slow, gradual release of pressure. They are also requesting the activation of every cleaning drone in preparation. It seems that every safety and hygienic measure is being proactively taken. Then there is their scent when they talk about it, Quartermaster Husk said, after a particularly slow and contemplative blink. His tongue flicked out as if trying to recapture the memory of the smell. The smell is so very similar to the smell they give off when anticipating danger, he said slowly. Not exactly the same. Sent me here, but very, very close. I simply do not think that it would be safe to let this idea sprout. Commander Thresh hummed thoughtfully as he deliberately mulled over the arguments. It clearly wasn't enough to forbid a moral-boosting safety training exercise that everyone was so obviously willing to participate in. Clearly, Quartermaster Husk understood this as well. The dejected slump of his shoulders showed that clearly enough. It also showed that he clung to his theory that the training session was going to go horribly wrong in some unsentable way. The commander drew in a deep breath and bobbed his head firmly. Authorize the session on my word and note your objections as clearly as you are able, he said. Quartermaster Husk flicked his tongue out in obedience. Having the decision made clearly relaxed him, but he still looked uneasy. We will, at the very least, get good data on our newest allies out of it, Commander Thresh said with a comforting wave of his tail. Now I have to go inspect the outlying bases for predator safety. Hopefully the exercise will still be going on when I return, and you can detail your concerns then with the aid of active observation. Quartermaster Husk gave a non-committal grumble, and Commander Thresh scrambled briskly away to his transport. The predator inspection left him as uneasy as ever, not at the sight of any predator, but at the clearly murderous contraptions the humans insisted were basic predator defense. Granted, they had not lost a single ranger to predation since they had implemented the humans' tactics, but the buzzing of the electric fence alone was enough to set his scales tingling with empathetic stress for any poor creature that touched it. He arrived back at the base far later than he had expected, and was pleasantly surprised to find that the indicator's lights showed the exercise was indeed still in progress. Curious, he muttered as he approached the main airlock. The ground outside the airlock was dusted with a fine white powder, and signs of freeze burns tinged the ground cover that had been healthy when he left. His tongue scented that the dust was fire retardant. He grimaced in annoyance. How had the humans gotten waste product so far outside of the disposal area? He supposed the old quartermaster would be more than glad to fill him in. He ambled through the airlock and immediately noted the cacophonous noise from the far side. The airlock floor was covered in chemical fire retardant, interrupted with broad swaths that looked like the cleaning drones had tried to remove it, and had only marginally succeeded, and the air was stale with extra carbon dioxide. "Life support!" the commander snapped out. "Give me a carbon dioxide reading." The system exhausted a chemical profile for a fully safe and clear, but it was overlapped with an indicator that the systems were having to overclock to maintain that state. The commander rushed through the final lock and froze as he looked out on chaos. Before he could begin to process what he was seeing, a warm pair of hands scooped him up from under his forelimbs and deposited him under one of the benches the humans sat on to make putting their footgear on easier. "Safer under here, sir," Assistant Quartermaster Smythe said with a sigh before sitting back down on the bench above them. Commander Thresh was vaguely aware that Quartermaster Husk was grumbling something beside him. It was no doubt some variation of having told him so, but the chaos that had taken his base was consuming the commander's attention. All obstructions had been moved out of the main hallway, and the cargo doors had been thrown open. Someone had painted guide tracks seemingly randomly across the floor, and what seemed like every disc-shaped cleaning drone had been set loose in a sea of chemical fire retardant, which might have made some level of sense, he supposed. Except someone had gone to great lengths to set controlled fires alight on top of each and every drone. Dashing through this chaos, humans, more humans than he thought his base contained, perched in pairs and singly on the office chairs, meant for their use, and mobile benches meant for the use of the lower-bodied gathering. The humans appeared to be using the expired fire extinguishers as propulsion, explaining the sea of retardant that covered the floor. When a human managed to get near a flaming cleaning drone, they would aim the extinguisher at the flame and hold it there until the propulsion of the escaping gas or chemicals pushed them away. The second human used an extinguisher in the opposite direction to counter, but without apparent synchronization it seemed difficult to manage. "Are they practicing putting fires out in zero-gravity conditions?" The commander finally managed to gasp out, hoping that he sounded like a reasonable adult rather than the sun-stunned hatchling he felt like. "I have no idea," Quartermaster Husk grunted out as he rubbed his nose against a thigh to wipe off some retardant. "Well," Commander Thresh said with a tone of forced cheerfulness, "all the fires are nearly out, so this should be over soon." "Takes them maybe 2 minutes to put the fires out," Quartermaster Husk snapped. "Then how are they still—" Commander Thresh began. His question was interrupted as an extinguished cleaning drone rolled past them, busily sucking up retardant. One of the single humans on an office chair rolled past, and with a whoop of glee sent a gout of flame pouring into the dish taped to the drone's top. The flame seemed to come from an improvised device. The fireproof drone continued on its way dutifully with a fresh pillar of fire leaping from its dish. Delighted hoots from the paired humans followed as they tried to aim for the newly lit drone. "What could go wrong?" Quartermaster Husk demanded in a grim tone. "I begin to understand why my human colleagues fear that question," Commander Thresh murmured. "Humans are weird cupboards and conchs." "And you are quite sure that humans use the same pattern recognition matrices that the rest of us use?" Rolls Around asked. Fourth Sister flicked her antenna in a modified agreement. She was confirming the statement, but with reservations. At the moment, her head was tilted at the medical report she was composing. She finally affixed her hive sigil to the end of the report and immediately threw her body into a full stretch. He wriggled the appendages at either end of his soft, pliant body to demonstrate, and Fourth Sister flicked her antenna again before setting them stiffly. "But you do have the concept of blunt trauma injury in your language," she said. "Not as much as you'd think," Rolls Around said. "So the concept really exists in our world much like radiation sickness in yours," Rolls Around continued when he came back to the surface. "I don't know why this human seems to be suppressing his instincts on the matter." "His dossier did mention a general lack of situational awareness," Rolls Around said. "How do you know that?" Fourth Sister asked with a sharp click. "Oh, it's a fascinating complex many humans have," Rolls Around said. "The Central University asked us to do a full write-up on the behavior in any humans we came across. Not really anything I can wrap my modal appendages around. Just slightly out of my reefs, if you know what I mean. But the analysis they worked up is simple enough, so I just turn it in for any human I am around for more than a week or two." "Can it spread any light on this human's behavior?" Fourth Sister asked. "Well, as I asked before, are you sure humans use the same pattern recognition matrices that the rest of us do?" Rolls Around repeated. "I had assumed that was a facetious question," Fourth Sister said with surprise. "My warm sister," Rolls Around murmured. "You have been spending far too much time with the humans." "Perhaps I am," Fourth Sister said as her neck frill lightened in amusement. "Yes, as far as every university study has been able to confirm, they show the same pattern recognition of every other sapient species, the composting ones excepted, of course. We haven't been able to string a single line about how they work, but plant intelligence can't be expected to offer much data on mammal intelligence." Rolls Around hummed in surprise. So you have determined them to be plants? He asked, more than willing to float down another current of conversation. No, Fourth Sister said, her antenna curling tighter. But our first mother has determined that discussing them as such will be far less detrimental to future intercourse than not having any word at all to use for them. That sounds logical enough, Rolls Around agreed. We call them algae, of course. The workstation chimed with the notification that Fourth Sister's report was complete, and she tilted her head to focus all of her direct attention on Rolls Around. What do pattern recognition matrices have to do with this injury? She asked, tapping a finger on the report. If they are all the same, nothing, Rolls Around said. Just a sealed channel I was exploring. No, if I were to toss out a strand, I'd say that this human just has a poorly developed spatial memory. What does spatial memory have to do with this? Fourth Sister asked. Ponder on their extremely limited binocular vision, Rolls Around said. Limited? Fourth Sister asked with a derisive flick of her antenna. During that time, he was quite blind to everything outside of that cone. They do have other sense to compensate, Fourth Sister observed, which are limited to a near-blind sense of touch, with all other lacking either range and/or direction, Rolls Around pointed out. To compensate for this, they have a spatial memory that activates so quickly they can use it in active combat. Fourth Sister clicked in astonishment as she processed these new ideas. Then her frill rippled in annoyance. Then why cannot, she demanded, this human remember the location of the same cabinet corner that he has slammed his head into 7 times now? It appears that while this ability is innate in humans, it must be trained to be properly useful, Rolls Around said. Humans are weird out of joint. Are you quite sure that the harness crates are within the human's lifting tolerances? Fourth Click asked, his wings twitching a bit as he settled himself on the perch beside the base commander. They are far under the tolerance levels for even the weakest human, Commander 57 Clicks stated with a curt tone to his voice. When I suggested bringing in a lift, the human nearly had a fit, laughing. Fourth Click didn't respond, but let his eyes track the human who was currently organizing the storage compartments. The planet they were on was shifting into what the humans called a monsoon season. While the storage compartment was rated for the wing-ripping force of the winds, the design involved a bit too much flexibility to allow for storage on the outer surfaces when the walls started pulsing to the wind songs of the planet. Therefore, all of the storage shelves along the walls were being disassembled and restructured for extra structural support, and their contents were being distributed throughout the base. Of course, the humans were an unspannable aid in this process. They could have never gotten it done without their help. From everything they heard, the humans' own base construction had taken a different tactic. The outer shell of their base was completely rigid, several wingspans thick, and reinforced with several layers of rock that had been pulverized, suspended in liquid, then sprayed over the framework. It was a style of construction that would only apply to creature with the human's rock-like bones, he was sure. Finally, Commander 57 Clicks noted his deliberate silence and glared over at Fourth Click. In reply, Fourth Click shrugged and aimed his eyes on the human. Commander 57 Clicks gave an almost petulant growl and followed his gaze. The massive human was just then approaching the shelf where the crates of harnesses were. One massive arm swung in a steady rhythm to provide balance. The other arm was clutched to his side as if he was carrying a datapad, but there was no datapad to be seen. The human reached the rapidly dwindling supply of crates on that wall. That near the edge of the compartment, the human's thick hair nearly brushed the ceiling. The human reached up as if to grab the box, but just before his hand made contact, the human paused and grunted in what was very clearly pain. It was a short moment. No one would have noticed if unless they happened to be looking at the human at just the right moment. "What human nonsense is this?" Commander 57 Clicks demanded with a distinct clicking together of his teeth. "Mustn't grind your teeth," Fourth Click reminded him gently, only to get a rather sour look in response. The human had reached the box and lifted it down to his center of mass with another pained grunt. Commander 57 Clicks hissed at that, and Fourth Click whistled through his teeth in agreement. Humans only bothered centering mass when it was well past the mass of the flight harnesses in the crates. "I will investigate this," Commander 57 Clicks said in a grim tone. "What's got you in such a flit?" Fourth Click asked in surprise. Overloaded or mislabeled crates are hardly something to get fluffed over. "The crates are exactly what they say they are," Commander 57 Clicks stated. That human is concealing an injury. What? Fourth Click demanded. That would be childlike foolishness. Yet when he looked back over at the human clutching the relatively small crate to his center of mass, he had to agree that it did fit the observed data better than his theory. Probably a minor phalange injury, Commander 57 Clicks went on. I've been told that such injuries are considered so minor for them that essentially all medical intervention is either useless or counterproductive. The only thing to do is to completely rest the appendage. So why isn't he resting? Fourth Click demanded. A quirk of human nature, Commander 57 Clicks said with a wave of his wing. They consider something that is such a small proportion of their mass important in direct proportion to its size. They take it as an affront against the nature of things that their entire mass could be rendered non-functional by a malfunction in such a tiny part. How very human, Fourth Click said with a wry chuckle as they took flight and swept over to where the human had just placed the crate on the hovering transport. Ranger Cram! Commander 57 Clicks snapped out, dropping his voice so the human could hear him better and shouting, You are to rest your injured finger, and if that means resting the whole of your body, you will do it. The human jumped and looked up at them with a wide-eyed expression before turning his head to the side, giving them a view of the freakish white area of his eyes interlaced with blood vessels. Fourth Click tried to hide his shudder. You could almost swim in those eyes. My fingers are completely uninjured, Ranger Cram said quickly, holding up his hands and flexing them for the base commander to see. They did appear completely functional. They what? The commander demanded as he swept forward and landed on the human's shoulder. Part of you is damaged? Nothing is damaged, the human insisted. Not really. Not. Really? Commander 57 Clicks pressed. The human heaved a massive sigh that seemed to be trying to rival the storm outside, and his arm folded around to rub at a point about halfway from his legs to his neck. Well, one of my ribs is out, he admitted in a grudging tone. Hurts a bit and slows me down, but it's one of those things where keeping working is really no worse for me than resting would be. Best to just keep working around it till the Chiro gets here in a week or two. Please explain that adverb, Commander 57 Clicks interjected. What do you mean by your rib being out? The human paused and his face worked as he tried to explain what was clearly a simple term to him. Finally, he held up his hands, made them into fists, and placed one over the other before flaring out his fingers. So one of my ribs, he said slowly, slipped out of where it's attached to the vertebrate and is off kilter. Both of the winged let out horrified shrieks and darted into the air. The human winced at the sound and glanced at them uneasily as they darted around. Your spine is misaligned? Commander 57 Clicks finally calmed himself enough to confirm, even as he gave a discreet wing signal for Fourth Click to contact the human commander. They were going to need backup on this issue, no doubt. The human groaned and raised his hands to rub his face. Look, he said, it's not a big deal for us. I'll just be in a bit of pain until— Sit down! Snapped the base commander. The human heaved another sigh and gave a longing look at the half-empty shelf before slowly lowering his massive frame onto the hovering transport. It's not a big deal, he muttered in protest once more.